Hello. Welcome to the third webinar in the Urban Institute series on strategies for supporting young people transitioning out of foster care. I'm Mike Pergament. I'm a senior fellow at the Urban Institute. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan social policy research organization. Now, before we start, I do have some housekeeping. As the slide shows, this event is being recorded, and the recording will be posted online afterward along with the slides. And you can also see the speakers, I said the slides, as well as speakers' biographies. Right now, all participants are muted, but we encourage you to put questions or comments in the Q&A box at any time, and we'll be getting to a Q&A period at the end. Next slide. So this series of webinars, as well as the research that we're doing that underlies the webinars, is funded through by the Administration for Children and Families, Office of Planning and Research and Evaluation, or OPRE, in collaboration with the Children's Bureau as part of a larger project to plan the next generation of evaluation funded under the John H. Jiffy program to successful transition to adulthood. The Urban Institute leads this project with our partner Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago. Mark Courtney, professor at the University of Chicago, and I are the co-principal investigators for the overall project. I also want to acknowledge the great support that we get from our project officers at OPRE, that Maria Wolverton and Kelly McKenzie, as well as from the Children's Bureau, Catherine Heath, who handles all issues related to youth and young adults. Next slide. So our current work has many facets, but we're focusing right now on employment programs. And the goal of our work is to identify employment programs for young people transitioning out of foster care that might be models of potential national interests. And we want to explore how different models result in different program approaches. They deal with different target populations or subsets of the youth and young adults, and what the goals of those programs are, and ideally to identify where there's potential to conduct a rigorous impact evaluation so we can learn a lot more about what actually works for helping young people who transition out of foster care. So today we're going to focus specifically on two formative evaluations we conducted of two particular programs that are aiming to help youth who are currently or formerly in foster care make that transition into the labor market. The two programs, iFoster Jobs and My Time, take very different approaches to helping these young people prepare for employment. There is going to be a future webinar where we will take more of a broad view look at different types of employment programs. We won't be focusing on a couple in particular, but looking across a spectrum to see how different programs, as I said, sort of approach who they target, what their approach is, what their goals are, and how they implement their activities. And that date for that webinar has not yet been set. We expect it to be in early summer, so do keep your eye open for the announcement. But today, as I said, we're going to talk specifically about these formative evaluations. So you're going to hear first from Jiffy Lansing, who has sort of led this work, and she'll give some background on the study and introduce the two programs that we've selected for formative evaluation. You'll then hear from the programs themselves. First from iFoster Jobs, you'll hear from Serita Cox. She's the co-founder and CEO of iFoster Jobs. And Serita will give some background on the organization and the program. And then she's going to enter into a discussion with Debbie Reddick, who's an alum of the iFoster Jobs program. She'll then turn it over to Sean McGinnis, who will tell us about the My Time program. Sean is the chief program officer at Lawrence Hall in Chicago, where the program is housed. Again, Sean will sort of describe the program, and then he'll enter into a discussion with Darren Robinson, an alum of the My Time program. Once we hear from the programs themselves and the alumni, We'll turn it back over to Jiffy Lansing, who will be joined by Hannah Daly. Hannah is a research analyst here at the Urban Institute, and together they will present the findings from our formative evaluation of these two programs. There's a lot to cover, so I'm going to let this get going. We do hope to try to leave about 15 minutes for questions at the end. So I'm going to now turn this over to Jiffy.
Thanks, Mike. Next slide, please. So why should we care about employment programs for young people transitioning out of foster care? Next slide. Well, we know that employment provides the ability to earn money. It also provides an opportunity to develop important work and relational skills as young people transition into adulthood. We also know that young people who age out of foster care have less stable employment and lower earnings than their peers who were never in foster care. At the same time, very little is known about programs that support young people transitioning out of foster care, connect to and succeed in employment. Next slide. We also know that young people in general face many barriers to early employment. They may have trouble identifying potential work opportunities, completing applications, not know how to present themselves in an interview or how to behave in a work setting. But young people transitioning out of foster care may also not have easy access to their ID or work papers needed. Young people transitioning out of care also face some additional obstacles, have trouble finding stable housing, can not find reliable transportation, may have trouble accessing childcare and health and mental health care, all of which can impede their ability to succeed in work. Next slide, please. So what is our study? Next slide. We wanted to conduct formative evaluations of programs that had the potential for future rigorous impact evaluation and had models of potential national interest, as Mike mentioned earlier. Back in 2014, there was a convening of policymakers and other stakeholders discussing what we should be thinking about when thinking about employment programs for this population. So we started with what we learned from that, then conducted a search for employment programs that focus on this population through internet searches and our professional networks. We found 18 programs and made initial calls to 12 of those. And of that, identified 2 that fit our criteria. That is, they had strong program models and were serving large enough numbers of young people that they had the potential for future rigorous impact evaluation design. Next slide. So we conducted a number of site visits with both of these 2 programs. We talked with their program leadership and staff, as well as community and employer partners. We conducted focus groups with participants and were able to observe trainings and other interactions between young people and the program. And with those data, we conducted thematic coding and analysis. We also were able to analyze program data that the programs themselves maintain. So this was on program participant characteristics, participation, and some employment outcomes. And then finally, because we had all of this information from 2 programs, we were able to do some comparative analysis, looking for patterns and relationships not only within each program, but across the 2 programs. Next slide. So as Mike mentioned, the programs we selected are iFoster Jobs in Los Angeles, California, and Mentoring Youth to Inspire Meaningful Employment, or My Time in Chicago. Next slide. I'm now happy to turn it over to the co-developer and founder of iFoster Jobs, Serita Cox, and she'll talk about that program.
Thank you so much, Jiffy, and thank you all for attending today. I am Serita. I'm the CEO and co-founder of iFoster. iFoster is a national nonprofit that provides resources and supports to children and youth in the foster care system and those aging out. We fill the gaps to ensure youth have what they need to succeed. This past year, we actually provided over $125 million worth of resources, from technology to tutoring to food and emergency funds. One of the gaps that we focus on is employment. So back in 2014, 2015, we developed a jobs training and employment placement program in partnership with a single grocery store, a grocery employer in our tiny little Placer County, California, up here in Northern California. We were seeking to design a program for first jobs that could scaffold a youth to financial independence as they aged out of care and put them on a career path. Fast forward to now, and we've expanded to the Bay Area, LA, and Riverside, leveraging a statewide SNAP employment and training contract to fund our expansion. We have over 47 national and regional employer partners, from CVS to Starbucks to hotels, car repair manufacturers, supply chain logistics, and of course, still lots of grocery stores. And over 750 foster youth have earned permanent employment through our program. Many of them have completed college at the same time. They've been promoted and they've moved along their career paths, becoming marketing analysts, managers, and entrepreneurs in fields far removed from the grocery store. Next slide, please. Our program model is focused on youth achieving competitive permanent employment at a living wage that can give them the financial stability they need to age out of care. Build, please. The model has two phases. In phase one, we prepare youth for employment. This is anchored in the needs of our employer partners. We work with them to understand what they're looking for in employees. Apologies, my internet just went out. So in phase one, we work with employer partners to understand what they're looking for in their employees. Soft skills is always at the top of the list, and that's what we infuse in our training. Youth enroll in our 30-hour training as a cohort of no more than 25 in a class. In LA County, we run multiple classes simultaneously, as do our partners. And we all anchor in the same WOW curriculum, which is both evidence and trauma informed. Youth graduate training and are assessed to determine if they are ready for competitive work or not. If they're not ready, we work with our partners to get them work experience and internships. Once they achieve readiness through those programs, they come back to us to be assessed. When they're ready for competitive work, we assess how their skills, their desires in a job, and career aspirations line up with our employer partner job opportunities and other job opportunities that exist. And together with each youth, we identify potential job matches. Next build, please. That gets us to onboarding and into a job, which is phase two. We work with youth on their agreed upon employment plan that identifies the exact job opportunities and employer partners that they wish to be employed with. We help them apply for jobs and we prepare them for interviews. Our employer partners agree to put them first in line for interviews, but let's be clear, our youth stand on their own 2 feet. Each of them earn their own jobs by themselves. We do make sure they have all the resources they need, whether that's transportation, stable housing, communications devices, childcare, and interview clothes. And we provide ongoing coaching, check-ins, and resources as our youth settle into their jobs, get promoted, move to other jobs, and build their career. We check in frequently with alumni, letting them know about new opportunities in their career fields and seeing if they need anything. And in fact, years later, alumni still check in with us, most of the time to tell us how they're doing. In fact, just last week, 2 of our alums from 2015 checked in. Isaac Vincent started with us as a requirement of his probation. He was facing some serious jail time due to anger management issues, and this was his last chance. He earned a job bagging groceries, which was his first job ever. Fast forward through some bumps in the road that we collectively helped him overcome. And Isaac texted last week to inform us he is now a manager at Home Depot, overseeing the hardware department, loving life, and is buying a house with his girlfriend. Krisha Ross, another 2015 grad, first alum out of LA County, checked in this past Friday, actually, with some very exciting news. She's grown a lot since she first enrolled with us. She's not only earned her GED while working her first job, but has an AA in marketing communications. She's moved on from starting as a grocery clerk at Ralph's to a floral department manager. And now she is a retail marketer for the biggest marketing firm in the grocery industry, Advantage Solutions. She too is settling down with a fiance in her own house, and they have a baby on the way. All of which makes us extremely proud of what our young people have achieved and continue to achieve. All they needed was a little support to get them going and to keep them on track. Next slide, please. That brings us to our lessons learned. The biggest lesson learned, and quite frankly, the worst thing any of us can do, is set up our youth for failure. It is so very important to meet them where they are and build them up. Our program is about scaffolding them to financial independence and a career. That means that not all youth start in the same place, and not all youth progress at the same rate, which is why once may not be enough. Many youth go through our programs multiple times until they feel confident that they can truly earn that first competitive job. And of course, it takes a village. To the bane and frustration of our evaluators, yes, we work very closely with community partners to provide the supports our youth need. County Child Welfare and Transitional Housing refer youth to our program. Caseworkers attend our trainings and are there to provide moral support. They'll actually do one-on-ones with youth who are having life issues or need some additional support. Workforce boards and other agencies use the same curriculum that we do to train our youth and send them to our assessment day so we can serve more youth and help place more youth in jobs than our small team alone could do. And of course, because of our community partners, we can provide all kinds of resources, housing, legal supports, transportation, interview clothes, everything our young people need. Which brings us to my last lesson learned. Resources, resources, resources. Our youth can earn a job, but if they don't have permanent housing, they don't have transportation to get there, or a reliable phone to take that call from a boss, or proper clothes, they won't keep that job very long. So those are our lessons learned. But what I'd really like to do is dive in and have a conversation with Debbie. Next slide, please. So Debbie, come on up. Hi, Debbie, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Very good. So let me first introduce Debbie before we get going. So Debbie Reddick, she entered foster care as an infant. She's now all of 21. She's studying psychology at Cal State Northridge, which if any of you are familiar with the Cal State system, Cal State Northridge is a very tough school. She wants to run her own nonprofit supporting foster youth, and she joined the iFoster Jobs program at the age of 18 in 2018 as a freshman in community college. All right, Debbie, let's get going. So let's just start with the beginning. Why did you join the iFoster Jobs program in the first place?
Okay, so the reason why I joined is because I heard about it at my college, which was Compton College. I knew I wanted a job and I needed to push myself due to my anxiety. I knew the jobs program would be a challenge for me, but I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. The first training didn't go too well because I broke down crying. It was just too much with school, homework, and life. And because of my anxiety, I felt like I just couldn't do it, like I was going to fail. But like our iFoster trainer, Patrick, says, you miss 100% of the shots you do not take. So I decided to take that shot that day.
And it's a really good thing that you did. We're very happy that you decided to, despite the tears. So what did you learn from the iFoster Jobs program?
Well, something I learned from the iFoster's Jobs program is that I definitely can do it and that I wasn't going to fail. We learned so much more than that, though. We learned how to translate our experiences in foster care to sellable skills like resilience, ability to deal with change, self-advocacy, being on time, being courteous to customers / coworkers, and being persistent. But also we learn about professionalism, how you dress, how you communicate, being honest and transparent with your employer, not just telling them what they want to hear. Also, we learned a lot about preparation and that it takes a lot to get ready for a job and impressing your potential employer. You have to be ready for whatever it takes once you get the job so you can keep it.
Excellent. Okay, so now I teed up what assessment day was, but I didn't really talk about it. Tell us about what assessment day is all about.
Okay, so assessment day was kind of exciting for me because I thought once the training was over, I wasn't going to have any support, but iFoster supported me along the way, every step. The entire training cohort is it's like all the foster youth, they go with the trainers earlier, and other partners come together for a big day of interviews and job matching. Prior to assessment day, we go to boutique day, and that's where we get outfitted for interview clothes, shirts, pants, shoes. We also have mock interviews with panel interviewers from iFoster employer partners and workforce partners. They ask us questions and give us studies asking us what we do in specific situations. They also score our answers and give us feedback. We get a portfolio of different job opportunities iFoster has through its employment partners, such as Starbucks, Rouse, CVS, and many others. We receive like let me see, like different jobs, and we get told what is required for that job. We talk about what we want out of our jobs and the environment, how to make money, build our career, and to have fun in the job we want to work in and be accepted. We select the employment partners that we want for our career and jobs that we're interested in. And after all that, we graduate and we celebrate with a motivational speaker, and they have a lunch and special desserts that were made by iFoster's former foster youth cake pops. And also at the end of the day, we meet with the iFoster team member one-on-one, and we create our individual employment plans. We review how we did in the interviews and on the test and which employers and jobs that we are interested in. We talk about our availability schedule, how far we can travel safely to work, what we're looking for in a job. And we also talk about our career goals. We go over a checklist for what is needed, like resources of employment, like a working phone, stable housing, work clothes, transportation. And lastly, we develop an employment plan of action, which includes the employers and jobs that we're going to apply to, what resources we might need once again. And then we're assigned to a job specialist from iFoster who will work with us for the plan, and then we start doing our applications.
Excellent. So so that's how you got to the plan, but how did that plan become a reality? How did you get the job that you wanted?
So how iFoster does it, they basically match you with whatever jobs that best fits your career goals. So since I want to be a youth mentor for foster youth, I'm a psychology major. I want to create my own nonprofit organization for foster youth one day. So iFoster matched me with Tay AmeriCorps, and Tay AmeriCorps hires current and former foster youth to be peer mentors and resource navigators for other foster youth. While the program is ran by iFoster, I still had to apply. I still had to go through interviews, including a panel interview with senior level people such as LA County, DCFS, and other LA agencies, not just iFoster people. I couldn't believe it when I got selected out of hundreds of applications. A really valuable thing that I got from iFoster is the ongoing support. They help you every step of the way. They provided moral support to ensure that I was emotionally strong through my job and on my path. What I like most about being a Tay AmeriCorps is that it gives me a clear view of what I want to do in life.
Fabulous. Now, if you could just leave the audience with one thing about the iFoster Jobs program, what would that be?
One thing that I will leave the audience with is that I like working with iFoster because they treat you like family. It's not just a job. It's not you just going to get employment. Anything you need, they're literally there. You just give them a call. They're right there. They'll connect you to where you need to go. They actually care for us, and they also teach us not to treat foster youth as though they're others or troubled kids, but treat them like human beings, like everyone else.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Debbie. As you can see, we're super proud of our alum. We're so lucky to have you to be able to work with young people like Debbie. And we know that she's going to end up with her own nonprofit one day, making changes for foster youth. So let me turn it over from our program to the other program. Let me hand it over to Sean McGinnis from My Time. Sean, how are you?
Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Debbie, that was fantastic. I'm just really impressed. I wish we had a live audience so people could applaud and just tell you how amazing that was. But I'm sure we will at the question and answer. So I'm Sean McGinnis. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Lawrence Hall. I've been working at the organization for about 13 years. And in 2013, we, after looking at youth in our transitional and independent living program, and seeing the challenges that some of them had as they were going into the workforce, whether it be feeling a lack of connection or sometimes struggle to know what it means to even be at work, to go to work, and some of the different things we learned from other employment programs around. We partnered with the Department of Children and Family Services to develop a model that was really rooted in being trauma-informed and focused on mentoring as we helped young people move into the workforce. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, Lawrence Hall started the My Time program in 2013. Our goal was to serve 60 youth that year as a pilot in Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, with the goal of being trauma-informed and helping to mentor young people through the experience of understanding what it means to work, job searching, joining the workforce, and then retaining employment. So Lawrence Hall as an organization has been around for over 155 years. And so in that time, we've grown from being an orphanage in the Civil War days to what we are now as a full-scale community-based human service organization, really rooted in child welfare. So we provide residential treatment, we provide transitional and independent living, foster care. We also have a therapeutic day school. But within these programs, we serve about 700 children and families, and that helps us to uniquely understand the challenges that youth in care experience, the system around them, which I think is really important to understand. And we found that some providers that are really employment focused instead of focused on understanding youth in care sometimes don't understand that system. We understand the access to resources that young people in care have, or sometimes their lack of resources, and that can also be really important. There is, thankfully in Illinois and in Cook County for youth in care, there are a ton of resources that they have access to, and it's our job to bring those together to help young people find success. We also understand the support system that young people have around them. So that support system might be their case managers, their foster parents, their biological parents, significant others, their guardian ad litem, all kind of different people, their teachers at school, and we try to bring them together. So our target population for the My Time program is youth who are 17 and a half to 21 in Cook County, primarily in Chicago and the near surrounding suburbs. And all youth have to be currently a youth in DCFS care. And in Illinois, different from some other states, you're eligible to be in care up until you're 21 years old. So our referrals come from DCFS directly. Several come from Lawrence Hall. Similar child welfare agencies, there's many organizations like Lawrence Hall around us that have similar programs, and we work collaboratively with them to recruit youth and enroll them in the program, as well as local schools. Word of mouth, young people referring their peers and their friends is probably our best form of recruitment. And this is the responsibility of our 4 employment mentors. So we have a team of 4 employment mentors, and they are responsible for youth recruitment and engagement, facilitating the career readiness training, doing the case management and mentoring, the job placement, retention support, and employer recruitment. So they have a pretty a heavy lift, but we have a great team. Next slide, please. So as I've mentioned, we really focus on being trauma informed in the work that we do, understanding that youth in care experience significant trauma, whether it be from abuse and neglect, family separation, movement to multiple placements, which can often disrupt their connection to positive adults or their understanding of, in this instance, the workforce, right? Understanding that I have a foster mom, let's say, that gets up and goes to work every day, and you understand your foster mom's struggles of balancing work and life. Sometimes when that is disrupted so frequently, you're not able to make those connections and understand what it means to have that balance. Often they are also potentially exposed to pretty significant community violence. So we really encourage our entire team to come from a trauma lens. All of our employment mentors receive a Trauma 101 upon orientation. There's tons of ongoing trauma trainings and other trainings from our staff development and training team that help to help build a context around the young people that we work with for our staff, and understand how to best work with them. And this team is supported by a counselor as the supervisor and a licensed clinical social worker as the program director. So from top to bottom, we are really focused on being clinically based and trauma informed in the work that we do. Our career readiness training is our soft skills group. You'll notice that I call it a group and not a classroom. It is not a class. So it's a 5 days career readiness training where we do all the traditional stuff of resume writing and interview skills and communication. But we also do talk about what does it mean to work? Who are some people in your life that you know that work, and what's their life experience? We often find that young people that have been really disconnected, they don't know a ton of people intimately that work in the jobs. They'll often reflect on their caseworker who they know at work, but they don't know at home. So again, that work-life balance becomes a challenge. We talk about the impacts of complex trauma and how that might impact brain development, relationship skills, and a whole host of other things. And we have really honest dialogue with young people about what that means, and focus as well on how they have overcome those challenges and how they have managed to succeed in incredible experiences. We talk about managing frustration and emotional intelligence. And we encourage our young people to share. The best learning in these groups happens when they share with each other. We really focus on having our groups not be lecture-based, not be a classroom. It really does reflect a therapeutic group when you sit in these sessions. We also incorporate some restorative justice approaches. So that helps young people start to build this collective and feel a part of a team, and separate a little from just this individuality. As we know, when you go to work, your individual performance matters, but so often you're a part of a team. And so just an example of how that might look in a group is if a young person shows up late to group, the rest of the group, young person that was late included, will sit and talk about the impact of being late, how it impacted their peers. Did they have to wait for group to get started? Did we have to go back over things we already went over because they were late? Whatever the case might be. How this might impact coworkers in the workplace, so that we can build, it's not just what happens in the group, we're helping you develop for what's going to happen in the workforce. And then what skills their peers have used to be on time. And I think, again, that's where some of the best learning comes from. Some youth will say, oh, I have a staff at my TLP, come wake me up. Or I set an alarm and I keep it far away from my bed, so I have to get out of bed to turn it off. All kinds of different tricks that they've learned that they can share with their peers. And then the young person who was late will talk about how they plan to repair that harm and what that means to the group. And then they begin to re-engage. So again, it really builds this team camaraderie, and they share in this experience. Next slide, please. So here's some of our program components. Quite a few of them I've already touched on, but our focus is really on helping young people in a 5-day training learn some basic skills. Really, we're just touching on the surface of these skills and then get them into the workforce as quickly as possible, but we do that through partnership. So the program really revolves around the employment mentor and mentee relationship. So that begins during the recruitment phase. Again, our employment mentors are responsible for recruitment, going to different foster care settings, going to different transitional living homes or residential settings. Can be really helpful there as they start to know other young people in care that might want to participate in the program. And then they get to know each other so much more during the 5 days of career readiness training. They're in group for about 7 hours. It's intensive. It's sometimes, depending on the room that we're in the season, it's hot, it's muggy, and we're talking and we're figuring stuff out, and we're getting to know each other. And our employment mentors are really encouraged to share their own life experiences as well as it can relate to young people. And then we partner with them through the phases of searching for employment. And we really focus on walking hand in hand with young people. So an example might be a mall crawl is part of our curriculum. It's one of the last days of the career readiness training, where they'll go with their employment mentor, usually another peer from the group, and they will go to a local mall or places that might be hiring that young people want to work. And they will share in their experience of asking, are you hiring? Tell me about your work culture. What's the next step? Can I hand you my resume? And then filling out applications. And they do this together. So there's on the spot training and coaching and support. In addition, we take all of our young people to their interviews. I very few times since 2013 can I think of a time a young person went to an interview where they didn't have their employment mentor right there with them. And we also take them to their first day of work at minimum. We really pride ourselves on being a coach, being a cheerleader, being a support for young people, because too many young people in care don't have those cheerleaders for them at home when things go well or when things don't go well. But it's always encouraging them to keep trying and that they do belong in the workforce. And so then in the job searching phase, we encourage regular contact with our mentees. We work with their case managers, we work with their school, we work with their placement staff and their foster parents, and everybody we can think of in the young person's life to help keep them on track, get excited about employment, practice the skills that we've talked about, be ready for their interviews, whether it means being dressed appropriately, being up on time and ready to go, and then staying in the workforce, which is the trickiest part of all of it. Once you get the job, how do you keep the job? And that's where we continue to support our young people for at least 90 days on their job with regular checks-in, supports, and building that team around them. Next slide, please. So now's the most exciting part of my short piece of the presentation is introducing a young man, Darren Robinson. Darren is an alumni of the program. He also resides in our transitional living program. And he's currently working with us on finding his second job. So if we could have Darren join, please. Hey, Darren, how are you?
I'm doing well, Sean. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. So Darren, could you share with the group just a little bit about your experience of being a youth in DCFS care?
Being a youth within a DCFS care, specifically with my time, has been an uplifting and an empowering experience.
Great.
Add a little
Thanks.
more?
Yeah, sure. If you want to share, just you came into care in 2013, I think you said. So.
Yes, and being with my time has definitely taught me a lot to be more personally proactive, thanks to their foundation of being proactive, engaging, and uplifting with youth. I love the idea of being with other youth within my time, doing interviews and giving each other feedback with the mentors right at our side to provide an overall boundary and standard for what they expect from us when working out in the real world and communicating with each other. And I love it. I love it.
That's great. Thanks, Darren. So what brought you to joining the My Time team? I know you have other options, or you could have just gone out to try to find a job on your own. Why did you decide to participate in My Time?
With my time, thanks to one individual who's mentored me, he's definitely taught me that there was more to life than just working. It was about being able to provide for yourself and growing as a person with the aesthetics of work and meeting other people in their experience. The dynamic of being able to learn from higher ups and other youth as well is definitely one of the most important parts that I've loved about engaging with my time.
That's great. Could you share maybe one or two things that have stood out specifically about My Time to you?
One of the biggest things that has stood out to me with my time is their ability to show their care within their work. Like I mentioned the word proactive because it is indeed set for youth. I don't feel like there is youth and then mentor. It's a more thorough, more tight, it's a more personal relationship with me and the mentor. It's really remarkable to be in an agency that's willing to do their part and allow the youth to be pushed appropriately with the tools, the support, mostly, and it's underrated. I know it's a word that is used in a more social world of trend, but it is definitely underrated. And I feel like a lot of more companies should follow behind my time in iFoster. And I couldn't ask for a more supportive group.
Awesome, I agree. Thanks, Darren. Can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with your employment mentor, Darnell Sapp?
Mr. Sapp, he's definitely straightforward. He's very punctual, but he's very consistent. He's definitely pushed me personally. He's helped assist me getting hired with UPS. And before getting hired with them, he's taught me that I can help you get any job you want to, but you can't just tell me that you want any job and I put you there, you can't do it. He's taught me to be dynamic and articulate with being able to be open to not just different jobs, but the different experience, the different lessons, and the overall backbone of what it means to have a job and providing for yourself in the real world. And I loved it. And I could just leave it at that.
That sounds great. I think it's a good thing to leave it at then. Thank you so much, Darren. And I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Jiffy now.
Thanks so much, Darren and Sean and Serita and Debbie. So fabulous to, well, Serita and Sean, see your faces again, and to hear from your alum who have gone through the program. It just reminds me of being out there doing our site visits. So fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to turn to our formative evaluation findings and the question of, do these programs do what they say they do? And here I'm going to turn it over to Hannah Daly.
Hi, thanks, Jiffy. Can we go to the next slide? So who do these programs serve? Next slide. Here is a breakdown of the participant demographics for both iFoster Jobs and My Time. iFoster Jobs is represented by the lighter blue bars, and My Time is the darker blue bars. As you can see, iFoster Jobs serves more females than males, and My Time serves more males. And in terms of race and ethnicity, My Time serves a majority Black or African American population, whereas it's a little bit more split for iFoster Jobs. Next slide. And for iFoster Jobs, we have some additional participant data on some additional characteristics. The majority of participants in the iFoster Jobs program are not parenting or caregivers to a child and do not have a juvenile or adult record. And we don't have age for participants in the iFoster Jobs program, but we do have foster care status. And slightly more participants are formerly in foster care than currently in foster care. Next slide. We do have age for participants in My Time. And as you can see here, slightly above half of the participants are 18 or 19 years old. And as we talked about on the last slide, slightly more of the iFoster Jobs participants were formerly in foster care than are currently in foster care. So from that, we can infer that the iFoster Jobs population is maybe a little bit older than the My Time population. Next slide. And I'm going to pass it back over to Jiffy right now.
Thanks, Hannah. So now I'm going to share about whether we found that these programs do what they say they do. And largely they do. They're implementing according to their models. Next slide, please. So this figure represents the touch points at which iFoster Jobs staff have interactions with their participants. iFoster Jobs, as Serita mentioned, really shepherd participants through each of these milestones, and they also help schedule and coordinate transportation as needed. And as Serita mentioned, they have strong relationships with community partners where they can rely on them to provide additional supports that the young people may need. Next slide. And this figure represents the touch points at which my time staff have interactions with their participants. And I am not trying to make folks dizzy. I'm not going to go through each of these circles, but the key takeaway really is that relationship building is central to every contact between my time staff and participants, and that carries throughout all program components, as well as to additional concrete and emotional supports that are needed along the way. I also want to point out that there's no real end in this figure. Participants may cycle through a number of jobs during program participation, and each job is treated as a learning and growing experience. Next slide, please. So the data that we got from the programs largely reflects their program model. iFoster Job has data on participants at each milestone through their model, from training through job match, as well as some check-ins after participants have gotten a job. On the other hand, My Time maintains data on every single contact between staff and participants, and every single one of those contacts has rich notes about the content of that contact. So in order to analyze the almost 10,000 contact activities for My Time's more than 400 participants, we needed to figure out how to develop a manageable sample. Next slide, please. And because we thought that the number and content of activities might be different based upon a participant's exposure to the program, what we did was we created a stratified random sample of 40 participants. So there are 10 participants from each quartile of number of contact activities. And you can see that on the leftmost column on the slide. You can also see that the more the contact activities, the longer the number of days in program. And for those in the quartile with the greatest number of contact activities, on average, they're in the program for almost a year. And then in order to get a better sense of the depth of engagement with the program, we looked at the number of days in the program with a contact activity between the program and the participants. So this is in the leftmost column, sorry, the rightmost column. You can see that those with the least number of contact activities have the greatest percentage of days with contact with the program. And that makes sense because the training is front loaded in the program. But when we looked into the content of these contact activities, we also saw that much of it was the My Time staff engaging with the young people, trying to get them to buy into the program. And throughout all the other quartiles, we see that participants continue to stay engaged with the program. On average, they have a contact activity about 1 in every 5 days out of the total number of days in the program. Next slide, please. Now, I know you got to hear directly from Debbie and Darren. Here are some of the key themes from our focus groups with participants. Those who went through iFoster Jobs were confident that what they learned in training would help them succeed in interviews and on the job. And they also had high expectations to find work quickly. And those who went through My Time emphasized that they really enjoyed the trainings, or I now know as Sean calls them, groups, and were more engaged than they expected to be. And they also talked about building close and trusting relationships with their employment mentor and other staff at My Time. Next slide, please. And we're going to go back to Hannah to lead off our employment outcomes findings.
Thank you. Next slide. So here we have the iFoster Jobs milestones that participants achieve while in the program and the number of youth that achieve each milestone. And as you can see in the circle on the right, 241 of the youth in our program data got a job or an internship. Next slide. And here is a breakdown of the industries that those youth were employed in. And this is just the youth who got a job, not the youth who got an internship. The category with the most number of youth is the retail trade category, and the average time to a job match was 56 days, and 72% of these employers are iFoster Jobs employer partners. Next slide. And this is just a further breakdown of that retail trade category. A majority of the youth who were employed in the retail trade industry were employed at a supermarket or another grocery store, which makes sense with the iFoster Jobs model because they started with an employer partner in the grocery industry. And I will pass it back over to Jiffy.
Great, next slide, please. So this is a little bit different. You'll see for our sample of My Time participants, the sample of 40, we found that there were 130 total completed applications. So obviously that's more than one application for at least some of these young people. We also found that there were 55 completed interviews. Again, young people, some of the young people were doing more than one interview. And then finally, we see 33 total hires. Now, this does not mean that 33 out of the 40 were hired. In fact, 23 out of the 40 were hired at least once, and 10 were employed more than once. That's how we get to that 33 number. Next slide, please. And here we also looked at the employers for My Time. And you can see that the majority of their participants found work in fast food restaurants and coffee shops. And then the spread for the rest of these categories is largely the types of things that you would find in any neighborhood. It's probably worth noting that for 6, we know that 6 of these young people got jobs because it was noted in their notes that they were hired, or that their employment mentor had driven them to their first day of work, but the name of the employer is not mentioned. So this may highlight that My Time's focus is more towards the youth than towards building relationships with employers. Next slide, please. So now we're going to dive a little deeper into each program's approaches. Next slide. In terms of training, the training components were largely the usual suspects for both programs. So resume development, interview prep, how to apply for jobs, soft skills training. But the programs really differed in how they were approaching their trainings. iFoster Job used a lot of work-based scenarios throughout the training that focused on the types of soft skills their employer partners need. On the other hand, My Time built a lot of reflection and sharing into their trainings to help participants explore what it means to be someone who works and how work relates to their lives and their goals. Next slide. Now, while the goals of each program can be considered employment, each has a different perspective about what that means. For iFoster Jobs, their participants are provided entree into a career pathway. For My Time, employment really serves as an opportunity for growth and development, and young people may cycle through a number of jobs as they find their footing in the world of work. Next slide. So what we see are 2 different types of employment programs with 2 different goals, approaches, and functions. My Time is serving a mentoring function through a trauma-informed lens by creating a safe space, both physically and relationally, for youth development, and through early work experiences. And iFoster Jobs is serving a gatekeeping function by training and screening participants for existing local work opportunities that they would not have had access to had they not had the connection with iFoster Jobs. Next slide. So what are the implications of our findings on our study? Next slide. So first of all, to start, neither program is ready for rigorous impact evaluation. Both are in contexts that are saturated with other programs. It would be hard to tease out the effects from each specific employment program from the effects of other programs that their participants may also use. Both programs would need to collect additional and different data on their participants and participation, and employment data is lacking. However, both programs are excellent examples of different types of employment programs for young people aging out of care. In fact, I think the big discovery here is that variation in these programs yields important insights about the different ways in which programs can be designed for different types of youth and in different contexts. So, for example, harder to reach young people may need a supportive adult and a number of developmental experiences to build towards success in the workplace. Whereas closer to ready work young people who already have a supportive adult in their lives can really be helped by program connections to employers that have career pathways. So not all employment programs are the same, and researchers and policymakers need to pay attention to the differences in how programs are implemented and for whom, in order to better understand how we can figure out how well they work. Next slide.
I think that's my cue to come back.
Sorry, Mike.
We've had a lot of really good questions, and we will probably run over for those who can stay, but I know we won't get to everybody's questions. I apologize for that, but we do have a lot of really good questions, and invite all the speakers to come on the camera. And I'm going to start with a couple things that sort of related, which are dealing with some of the barriers that youth like this face, and wondering if each program could talk about things like what you do in regard to transportation. Do you recruit employers that are near public transportation? And if not, how do you help youth deal with that? And then another barrier, which is, and this is not as much probably for my time where the youth are in care, but dealing with the unstable housing of youth after they leave foster care. So let me first turn that over to Serita.
Thanks, Mike. So yeah, our youth obviously face many barriers. Transportation is a huge issue. Even public transportation is a huge issue. Try taking public transportation in LA County or Sacramento County. It's terrible. What we do is, back when Debbie was talking about creating that one-on-one plan, one of the things we talk about is how far from your home you can safely go. So we usually talk about a 5-mile radius, and we look for employment opportunities within a 5-mile radius of a youth's home. Now, some youth can have better public access to transportation. Some youth even have cars, and then we'll actually increase that zone. We call it the zone of employability, but that's usually what we look at, is about 5-mile radius from a youth's home or from school, whichever they choose. In terms of housing, housing's always an issue, especially in LA County. Housing is a massive issue. We are very lucky that we have so many incredible partners that we do work with. So when we have youth who are in unstable housing situations, which is with very high frequency, we work with the Alliance for Children's Rights around in LA County around rapid rehousing programs. We are integrated with a lot of the transitional housing programs that exist. They feed us youth into our jobs program, and likewise we feed youth back into their housing programs when they need housing. But it is not an easy solution. It does take time. And in the meantime, we do try and find at least some stability for our youth. And if necessary, we actually do pay for hotels for a period of time until they can get permanent housing.
Sean?
Sure, yeah, thank you. So I'll just start by saying housing, again, is not as much of an issue for us because our youth are still in care while they're working with us, but it does pop up once in a while, which is when we bring in all of their other supports and figuring out why a youth in care is feeling like they don't have stable housing at the moment. In regard to transportation, Many of the youth, at least when we first started, were using public transportation. I think Uber and Lyft has changed the game a little bit. Youth are much more adapted at getting on an Uber or Lyft to go where they want to go. But we do go with all youth to their interviews and to their first day of work, which I think is a great opportunity for youth to learn. So if you're familiar with the geography of Chicago, many of our youth live on the south or west sides of the city. And then O'Hare Airport is on the northwest corner of the city, far northwest. It almost seems like it's not in the city anymore. But a lot of there was a period of time where O'Hare was hiring tons of young people from our program. And young people wanted that job because it sounds so cool to work at O'Hare Airport. When we're talking about a kid that lives on the south side of the city, that could be an hour and a half or more commute on public transportation. So when we go with them on the interview, it's a perfect opportunity to sit on the train with them and have that conversation about, is this realistic? And what does this mean in your life to add an hour and a half commute in public transportation in the snow? Does this really work? And for some kids, it absolutely works. They're just that motivated and driven. And for others, it doesn't. So it's a good chance to go to the interview, say thank you very much, and then look for another job opportunity. And again, we always have to talk about safety. Some youth, it might be 5 miles from their home. Some youth, it might be get me 5 to 10 miles away from my home. It really depends on their own involvement, feelings of safety, maybe how long they've lived in a specific foster home or not. So it's an ongoing and dynamic conversation.
Thank you. So another different tack, a couple related questions we got. So one, I think this is a really interesting question. I'll pose this to Serita about how can community college programs partner with iFoster, but also put a broader context of, and then I'll ask Sean this same question, which is sort of the extent to which you're not only focusing on getting people jobs, but a broader perspective of thinking about their education and training as well as entering the labor market.
Thanks, Mike. This is an excellent question. At the end of the day, we view our jobs program as a starting point, not an end point. Our youth should be doing some sort of post-secondary education, whether that's vocational college or what have you, because that's what's going to ultimately scaffold them in their career. So to us, that balance is hugely important. And we love partnering with colleges. We work very closely with the Guardian Scholars programs here in California. Those are the programs that have been set up specifically on campus to support foster youth. So we work very closely with them. We recruit foster youth from those programs. That's how Debbie came to us, was from her Guardian Scholars program. And then we seek to support their programming as well. In fact, our attain AmeriCorps program actually places youth on college campuses in Guardian Scholars programs to help connect youth to those incredible resources that exist on campus. Did that answer the question, Mike?
That was good. Yeah. I know the Guardian Scholar program at Cal State Northridge is quite active.
So for us at My Time, we're really focused on first job and entry-level employment. So we do talk about young people's dream jobs with them and what role in enhancing their education might play in that, but it's not necessarily a huge part of what we're doing in terms of getting young people their very first job. What I do love to see though is the number of young people we have that maybe haven't finished their high school education and they're 18 or 19 years old. We help them get that first job where they're moving boxes or doing something that is not maximizing their potential, and they realize how much they can't stand it. And then you get to have this conversation about, let's finish high school. You belong in the workforce. You can do all these things. Let's finish high school. Let's think about college, and let's think about a career. Because if you want to move boxes your whole life, that's awesome. I know Darren's was at UPS and absolutely loved the job, but it didn't maximize on his potential. And so now we can start to have that conversation of what might a college diploma or a college degree mean for you in terms of career advancement. And that's where the mentor comes in that relationship and bringing in the rest of their team in DCFS.
Thanks. I'm going to give the programs a rest for a minute and pick on Jiffy. Someone wants to know how these two programs were picked among the many we looked at.
So I think really it was that both of these programs were serving large enough numbers of young people that they would have the potential for a rigorous impact evaluation in the future. So that was sort of a question of research design. And the other sort of key component was looking for programs that had strong program models. And when we spoke with others that also had strong program models. There are a lot of really great small programs out there doing really interesting stuff. But these two had really strong program models and large enough populations for a potential future rigorous impact evaluation.
Thanks, Jiffy. So, Serita, you talked about a curriculum you use, and I know that's one thing that's a big issue in these youth employment programs. Can you talk a little more about, well, what's the name of it? And then what more can you tell us about it?
Sure. So we use a version of the World of Work program which was developed by Columbia School of Social Work. I will get corrected if I'm wrong on that, but it's Columbia. It's Columbia. But that in LA County in specific. We actually, when we started our program, Annie E. Casey was phenomenal. Annie E. Casey gave us their curriculum for the first Jobs Academy, which they ran successfully for 8 years out in Maine. So in actual fact, we kind of have two curriculums that we've now evolved ourselves based on employer feedback and youth feedback. But that's what we use. The reason why we use that in LA County is LA County, and I love this, was going for that we should all try to use the same basic training for job skills, whether it's a workforce board, whether it's a program like iFoster's, we should all use the same. And what that makes that wonderful is we're all speaking the same language. The core elements are the same. And when a youth goes through, let's say, workforce development with the South Bay WIP, they can still come to iFoster assessment day, and it's not strange to them at all. And we can help with that employment placement into permanent jobs. So it really ties in. You can get some training, get some internship and work experience, and then come through the iFoster Jobs program, and it's not going to be a shock to your system.
That's great, thanks. So Sean, there were actually quite a number of questions about your professional mentor component. I'm going to sort of just rattle them off and you pick what you want to answer. One, are they paid or are they volunteer mentors? How many mentors do you have at a time? What's the ratio of youth to mentors? Do you have a lot of turnover of mentors? And are there enough mentors for every youth who wants one?
Awesome. I think I can answer all of those. So our employment mentors are paid. They're staff. Typically in a program like ours, they'd be called a caseworker. That is what it very much sounds like they do. We just call them employment mentors because I think titles matter. And I think how we define the work we want you to do makes a difference. And we want them to be mentors. We want them to be partners. There are enough for all that want one. Our model has changed a little bit over time. When we first started when we first started as a pilot, we were much smaller. We had 2 employment mentors and an employment specialist that was like a job developer. As we've grown, we now serve about 120 youth a year. We've gotten rid of the employment specialist, although we have that as the agency's youth employment programs have expanded. We have job developers within the agency, not specific for the My Time program. And we've decided to use our funds to focus all of that on employment mentors. So now we have 4 employment mentors for all the youth in the program. So they rotate between running career readiness trainings so that they're always matched with young people that were in their career readiness trainings, and so much of the relationship is built there. And there's typically in our program plan, it's a 20-to-1 ratio. Right now, for example, with COVID, we have so many less kids in the program just because it's so hard to connect and figuring out how we do this virtually. It's much smaller. You might have 7 or 8 young people on your caseload. And that really varies as you see kids start to move through the program. So I would say on average, it's about 15 to 1.
Great, thanks. I think another question has to do with, came up in some of your presentations about not only helping you get a job, but helping you keep a job. And can you say anything more about what you do once they're in the workplace in terms of keeping the job? We'll start with Sean this time. Still, he's unmuted.
Sure, I see, I'll answer, but I see Darren's hand up. Did you have something you wanted to share about keeping the job?
Yes, Mr. Darnell Sapp would be the perfect example I would use for this. Upon one of our mock interview trials, he issued that upon us receiving a job, he always does a follow-up. I would reach out with him every week and he would ask me, is there anything that I would like to change? It's like a 5-minute miniature synopsis on the idea of what could always be updated or what could change. And it's good to know that anything could be updated. It's like tweaking a car. There's always room for adjustments. There's always room for improvement. And I like how Mr. Sapp implements that anytime we have our calls every week.
That's a great answer. Thank you. So for us, Darren's experience has been all with COVID, so it's a little bit different. But what I can tell you prior to COVID, and hopefully once we all get vaccinated after COVID, it depends on how the young person was employed. If they were employed through a connection that we had that already identifies a young person came from our program, then we might check in at their work, talk to their employer, and develop that relationship as well on behalf of the young person. If it's a young person that, let's say, got a job at a mall crawl, and the employer has no idea that the young person comes from our program, has no idea that they're a youth in care, then if the young person doesn't want that shared, we're not going to share it. So we don't necessarily build a relationship with their employer. We continue to build that relationship with their staff or their foster parents. And then we will do regular check-ins at work, but be much more discreet about it. We might pick up a kid and take them to, just randomly take them to a day at work to check in and see how things are going. Might pick them up after work and say, let's get a slice of pizza and talk about how work has been going. Again, it's really that relationship focus, and it does depend on how they got the job, through a connection of ours or sometimes a bit on their own with our coaching and support.
Serita?
So I'm going to let Debbie answer this. My one thing is that we do check-ins all the time, whether it's just even sending an emoji. It's just to say, hey, we're there. And if you need anything, you let us know. And that's really the iFoster way. And it starts from day one when your referral lands on our desk. So by the time they have a job, they know check-ins are happening all the time. Debbie, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, they call you a lot. They will email you a lot. They usually send us motivational messages and stuff like that, or they call us, on our break, ask us how the job is going, how we're feeling, how our mental health is. They even had us have I think it was a life coach or a mental health coach who call us like every week to check in on us and ask us how we're doing. And yeah, so they check in on us a lot.
And then if there's the need to intervene to more than a check-in. So for example, sometimes you get a job, you're super excited, but it means you have to get up really early in the morning to make it to work. That can be hard. So it's not uncommon for our job specialists to set up an alarm and help ensure that a youth is woken up in time. But it's just training wheels, right? At some point, youth are going to take it on themselves and own it. And all we are, and I think Sean would say the same thing, is we're their training wheels along the way until they don't need us anymore. And then they just check in and tell us when they're having babies and buying houses.
Great. Well, you both beat me to it. I was going to go to Debbie and Darren next for a different question, put you on the spot here. So we know that one important thing in any job, even at an older age like mine, is some of the soft skills you need, particularly how to get along with people, essentially. And in many jobs, it's how to deal with customers. That's the worst. how to deal with your coworkers, how to deal with your supervisors. I mean, how do you think these programs have helped you prepare and continue to improve in those areas? Debbie looks like she's ready.
Yeah. Well, some of the things we went through a whole bunch of training, like literally weeks. They teach us like how to keep our emotions in check, how to be respectful, basically, and to basically treat your coworkers with respect, and to not bring whatever you're going through at home or whatever to the workplace, and to always be professional at all times. And so we actually have like a workbook. I can't remember all of it. It was so long ago, but it's a workbook, and we go through every single thing down to how to dress, how to speak. And if you have a problem at the workplace, to go to the manager or whoever your supervisor is, rather than making it a problem in the workspace, so they teach us a lot of stuff like that. And we even do like we did one-on-one little mock things, like we'll make up a situation like in the iFoster training, and like we're in a workplace to basically role play what we would do in certain situations, like I explained earlier.
Darren?
With my time, I learned that it started with us. They work so hard in making sure that as individuals, we know how we react to things. That way we're more prepared to actually deal with real life situations. Piggybacking with what our previous spokesperson just stated, we do mock trials where we share our own experiences with our mentors. And once we share that, they provide their own sense of feedback, and they also integrate their own experience and how they would allow us to, again, integrate the idea of being more dynamic with the people of the world, because it can be rough, but it definitely helps, and I've liked it.
Great. Well, thank you both. And we've run well over, and we still can't get to all the great questions. I apologize for that, but I think we want to let people go. So I want to thank all the presenters. I want to thank all the audience for participating and joining in, and apologize again, we couldn't answer all the great questions. We'll try to look through them and see if maybe we can get some of them answered if possible. I want to remind everybody that the presentations and the slides, the recording and the slides are posted on the Urban website. I think that was put in the chat earlier, and that we will be having another webinar probably in early summer that has a more general look across different types of employment programs for youth in or aging out of foster care. And so once again, just thank you very much.